The red dust swirled around Zara's feet as she walked behind the hunting party. Her forearms moved nervously at her sides while she tried to keep up with the others. The purple marks on her skin looked different from the other Veltar people. Where their skin showed deep blue patterns, hers were pale and faded. Kethvar, her uncle, led the group across the rocky ground. His strong telepathic voice echoed in everyone's mind except hers. She could only hear bits and pieces of what he said. The other hunters shared thoughts and feelings through their minds, but Zara felt alone and cut off from them. "Stay close, weak one." Kethvar spoke out loud so she could hear him. His voice was cold and mean. "Today you prove if you belong with us, or if you belong with the dead." The crimson wastes stretched out in front of them like a sea of red rock and sharp stones. This place was where young Veltar came to show they were strong enough to survive. Most passed the test. Some did not come back at all. Zara touched the small knife at her belt. It was the only weapon they gave her. The others carried bigger weapons and wore thick armor. She had thin clothes and her weak telepathic abilities that barely worked. The sun was getting hot overhead. Zara felt sweat on her forehead as they walked deeper into the dangerous lands. Strange sounds came from behind the rocks around them. She could not sense what made those sounds like the others. There. Kethvar pointed to a cluster of dark caves in the distance. "The Thornbacks live in those caves. We will hunt them and bring back their shells as proof of our strength." Zara's stomach felt sick. Thornbacks were huge creatures with 6 legs and sharp shells that could cut through metal. Their claws were as long as her arms. Most hunting parties needed 10 or more warriors to kill just one Thornback. They were only 6 people, and one of them was her. The group moved closer to the caves. Zara tried to reach out with her mind to sense danger like she was taught, but she felt nothing. The telepathic world that others lived in was like a locked door to her. She could only use her eyes and ears and nose to understand what was around. A low rumbling sound came from the caves. The other hunters stopped and shared quick thoughts with each other. Zara saw their faces change as they spoke in their minds. Something was wrong. "Uncle," she said quietly. "What is it?" Kethvar looked at her with anger in his eyes. "There are more Thornbacks than we expected. Much more." The rumbling got louder. Dust began to fall from the rocks above the caves. Then, Zara saw them. 3 massive Thornbacks came out of the darkness. Their shells were black and covered with sharp spikes. Their 6 legs moved like a deadly dance as they crawled toward the hunting party. Their eyes glowed red in the shadow of the caves. "Run," Kethvar said in his mind to the others, but Zara could not hear the telepathic command clearly. The other hunters started moving backward slowly. Zara stood still, not understanding what was happening. She saw fear in their eyes but did not know why they were afraid. One of the Thornbacks lifted its head and made a terrible screeching sound. It had seen them. "Move, you fool." One of the hunters grabbed Zara's arm and pulled her. Now she understood. They were all running. Zara's legs were not as strong as the others. Her weak body could not keep up with the trained warriors. She fell behind as they ran across the rocky ground. The Thornbacks followed them. Their heavy feet made the ground shake with each step. Zara could hear their breathing, like the sound of steam coming from hot metal. "Wait for me," she called to the others, but they were already far ahead. She stumbled and fell on the sharp rocks. Pain shot through her knees and hands. When she looked up, the hunting party was still running away from her. Kethvar stopped and looked back. For a moment, Zara thought he would come back to help her. Instead, he spoke to the others in their minds. She saw them nod and continue running. Her uncle looked at her one last time. His eyes were cold and empty of love. "You are too weak to live," he said out loud. "Your death will slow them down. Maybe the rest of us can escape." Then he turned and ran after the others, leaving her alone. Zara felt her heart break. Her own family had left her to die. The people she grew up with had abandoned her to save themselves. The Thornbacks were getting closer. She could smell their breath now, like rotten meat and old blood. One of them was only a few steps away from her. She forced herself to stand up even though her legs were shaking. There was an old mining building near her, half destroyed by time and weather. She ran toward it as fast as she could. The first thornback reached the place where she had fallen. It sniffed the ground where her blood had dropped from her cuts. Its red eyes looked around, searching for her. Zara crawled into the broken building, through a hole in the wall. Inside was dark and full of old metal and broken machines. She found a small space behind some fallen beams and hid there. The thornbacks surrounded the building. She could hear them walking around outside, their claws scratching on the metal walls. They knew she was inside, but the space was too small for them to enter. She was trapped. She had no food, no water, and no way to call for help. Her own people had left her here to die. Zara closed her eyes and waited for the end to come. Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he looked through his telescope. The human man had been watching the strange hunting party from his hidden observation post on the rocky hill. His job was to study the rocks and minerals on this planet, not to watch alien people. But something about this group caught his attention. He had been alone on Kepler 442c for 3 months now. The Terran Mining Consortium sent him here to find valuable metals, but Jake knew the real reason he was here. He had been exiled from the other human colonies because he refused to follow orders that would hurt innocent people. Through his telescope, Jake watched the group of purple-skinned aliens running away from something. He counted 6 of them at first, but now he could only see 5. One had been left behind. What the hell, Jake muttered to himself. He moved his telescope to look at the area they had abandoned. 3 massive creatures were circling around an old mining building. Jake had seen these monsters before. The company files called them thornbacks, and they were some of the most dangerous things on this planet. Each one was as big as a truck, with armor like shells and claws that could tear through metal. But there was something else. Jake's equipment was picking up strange readings from inside that building. Heat signatures that looked like a living being was trapped inside. Jake lowered his telescope and thought about what to do. The smart thing would be to stay hidden and safe. The thornbacks had not noticed him yet, and he could wait for them to leave. But Jake Morrison had never been good at doing the smart thing. He grabbed his plasma rifle and checked the charge. It was an old mining tool meant for cutting through rock, not fighting monsters. He also picked up his bag of mining charges, small explosives used to break apart stone formations. "You're an idiot, Jake," he said to himself as he climbed down from his safe hiding place. The walk to the mining building took 10 minutes. Jake moved carefully, using the red rocks as cover. The thornbacks were still circling the building like sharks around a boat. They knew something was inside and they were waiting for it to come out. Jake got as close as he dared. He could see scratches on the metal walls where the creatures had tried to claw their way inside. Whatever was trapped in there was scared, and probably hurt. He aimed his plasma rifle at the nearest thornback and fired. The bright blue beam hit the creature in the side. It screamed and turned toward him, its red eyes full of anger. "Come on, ugly," Jake shouted. "Come and get me." The first thornback charged at him. Jake rolled behind a large rock just as the creature's claws hit the spot where he had been standing. Pieces of stone flew everywhere. The other 2 thornbacks heard the noise and came running. Now Jake had 3 angry monsters trying to kill. Him and his rifle needed time to recharge between shots. He pulled out one of his mining charges and set the timer for 5 seconds. When the first thornback came around the rock, Jake threw the explosive at its feet and ran. The explosion knocked the creature backward, but it was not dead. These things were tough. Jake's rifle was ready to fire again. He shot the second thornback in the head, and this time the beam went through its armor. The creature fell to the ground and did not get up. 2 more to go. The remaining thornbacks were more careful now. They stayed apart so Jake could not hit them both with one explosive. They moved in circles around him, trying to trap him between them. Jake used his last mining charge to scare them away temporarily. The explosion made a loud noise and lots of smoke, giving him time to run toward the mining building. "Hey," he called out in English. "Anyone in there? I'm here to help." A weak voice answered from inside, but Jake could not understand the words. It was definitely not human, but it sounded female and very scared. The thornbacks were coming back. Jake looked at the hole in the wall where the trapped person had entered. It was too small for the monsters, but just big enough for him. He squeezed through the hole and found himself in a dark space full of broken machinery. In the corner, behind some fallen metal beams, he saw her. She was definitely alien. Her skin was purple with faded markings, and she had 4 arms instead of 2. She was young, maybe a teenager by human standards. Blood covered her clothes from several cuts, and she looked like she had not eaten or drunk anything in a long time. When she saw Jake, her eyes went wide with fear. She tried to move further back into the corner, but there was nowhere to go. "It's okay," Jake said softly, putting down his rifle. "I'm not going to hurt you." She said something in her own language. Her voice was weak and full of pain. Jake pulled out his universal translator, a small device that could learn languages by listening to them. It would take time to understand her completely, but it was a start. Outside, the Thornbacks were still, trying to get in. They scratched at the walls and made angry noises. Jake looked at the alien girl's wounds. Some of them were deep and still bleeding. He had basic medical supplies in his pack, but he did not know anything about alien biology. "I'm going to help you," he said, speaking slowly and clearly so the translator could pick up his words. The girl watched him with fear and confusion as he took out his medical kit. Jake cleaned her wounds as gently as he could and wrapped them with bandages. She made small sounds of pain but did not try to stop him. When he was done, Jake gave her some water from his bottle. She drank it carefully at first, then more eagerly when she realized it was safe. The translator was starting to work. Jake could understand a few of her words now. "Why?" she whispered in broken English. "Why help me?" Jake looked at her tired, frightened face. She reminded him of all the innocent people his old commanders had wanted him to hurt. People who needed protection, not more pain. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. 3 days passed in the broken mining building. Jake had moved some of the heavy metal pieces to make a better shelter inside. The Thornbacks had finally given up and gone back to their caves, but Jake knew they would return if they smelled food or heard noise. Zara was getting stronger. Her wounds were healing and she could sit up without help now. The universal translator was working better too. They could have simple conversations, though sometimes they had to use hand signals to explain things. "Your name is Jake," she said, pointing at him with one of her 4 hands. "Yes, and you are Zara," he replied, offering her some of his dried food. She took the food carefully. Everything Jake did surprised her. Her people had taught her that humans were savage and cruel, but this human shared his food and water with her. He had risked his life to save her from the Thornbacks. "Why did your people leave you?" Jake asked gently. Zara's purple skin turned darker, which Jake had learned meant she was sad or embarrassed. "I am broken," she said quietly. "My mind cannot speak to other minds like normal Veltar. My uncle Kethvar says I am weak. He says weak ones should die so strong ones can live." Jake felt anger growing in his chest. "That's not right. Being different doesn't make you weak." "Your people do not think this way?" Zara asked. Jake was quiet for a moment. He thought about his own exile from the human colonies. "Some humans think like your uncle, but not all of us. I was sent away from my people because I would not hurt innocent families during a mining war." "You were punished for being kind?" Zara looked confused. "My commander said I was too soft. They said good soldiers follow orders, even bad ones." Jake picked up a piece of metal and bent it with his hands. "But I think being kind takes more strength than being cruel." Zara watched him carefully. This idea was new to her. In Veltar society, strength meant telepathic power and the ability to survive alone. Kindness was seen as weakness. "How did you survive here alone for so long?" she asked. Jake smiled. "Humans are good at adapting. We figure out how to live in places where we don't belong." He pointed to his shelter. "I use the broken machines to make tools. I learned which plants are safe to eat and which water sources are clean. I studied the Thornback hunting patterns so I could avoid them." "But you fought them to save me," Zara said. "Sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it's dangerous." Over the next few days, Jake taught Zara some of his survival skills. He showed her how to purify water using heat and filters made from cloth. He explained how to identify edible plants and how to set up early warning systems using pieces of metal that would rattle when creatures approached. Zara was amazed by Jake's knowledge. He did not have telepathic powers, but his mind was sharp and creative. He could solve problems in ways she had never imagined. "My people think humans are primitive," she told him one evening as they shared a meal of cooked plants and purified water. "Maybe we are, in some ways," Jake said. "But being primitive isn't always bad. Sometimes simple solutions work better than complex ones." On the 7th day, Jake's early warning system started rattling. Something big was moving outside their shelter. "Thornbacks," Zara whispered. Jake looked through a crack in the wall. "No, worse, it's your people." Through the gap, Zara could see 5 Veltar warriors approaching the building. She recognized Kethvar leading them. They carried advanced weapons and wore protective armor. "They came back for me?" Zara felt a moment of hope. Jake's face was grim. "I don't think they're here to rescue you." The warriors stopped outside the building. Kethvar's telepathic voice reached out, strong enough that even Zara could hear it clearly. "Come out, weak one. Come out and face the judgment of your people." Zara's hope died. She understood now. They had not come to save her. They had come to finish what they started. "What do we do?" she asked Jake. Jake checked his plasma rifle. It was almost out of power and he had no more mining charges. 5 trained warriors with advanced weapons would be impossible to fight directly. "We run," he said simply. "Where can we go?" "They will track us with their minds. Then we go somewhere their minds can't follow us." Jake gathered his supplies quickly. "There's a place deeper in the planet near the molten core. The heat and energy down there interferes with telepathic abilities." "The molten reaches?" Zara's eyes went wide. "Nothing lives there. The heat will kill us." "Maybe," Jake said, slinging his pack over his shoulder. "But definitely we'll die if we stay here." Kethavar's voice came again, louder and more angry. "We know the human is with you. Humans are a disease that spreads weakness. You have been contaminated by its presence. You must both be cleansed." Jake looked at Zara. "Your choice. Stay here and let them kill us, or come with me and maybe die trying to live." Zara thought about the past week. Jake had shown her kindness when her own family showed her cruelty. He had shared his food, his knowledge, and his protection. He had treated her like she had value, even though she was broken by her people's standards. "I will come with you," she said firmly. Jake smiled. "Good. Now let's show them what a primitive human and a broken Veltar can do together." They slipped out through a back exit that Jake had made in the rear wall. The Veltar warriors were focused on the front of the building, giving Jake and Zara time to escape into the rocky maze that led toward the planet's dangerous interior. Behind them, Kethavar's angry telepathic roar echoed across the wasteland as he discovered their escape. The ground grew hotter with each step as Jake and Zara moved deeper into the planet. Steam rose from cracks in the red rocks around them. The air shimmered with heat waves that made it hard to see far ahead. "How much further?" Zara asked, wiping sweat from her purple skin. Her forearms moved constantly, trying to cool herself by fanning the hot air. Jake checked his small computer device. "According to my geological maps, there should be an old research station about 2 miles ahead. If we can reach it, we might find shelter and supplies." Behind them, Jake could see dust clouds in the distance. Kethvar and his warriors were following their trail. The Veltar were better equipped for this harsh environment, with cooling suits and advanced tracking equipment. "They are getting closer," Zara said, her voice filled with worry. "I know," Jake replied. "But the heat should start affecting their telepathic abilities soon. That's our advantage." They climbed over a ridge of sharp volcanic rock. On the other side, Jake saw something that made him smile. A metal building sat in a small valley, half buried in hardened lava flows. Solar panels on its roof were cracked but still functioning. "There," he pointed. "That's our destination." The building was older than Jake had expected. As they got closer, he could see Veltar writing on the walls. but the style looked ancient and different from the modern symbols he had seen on Zara's clothes. "This is very old," Zara said, running one of her hands over the carved symbols. "These words are from the early days of my people, before we changed ourselves." "Changed yourselves how?" Jake asked as he worked on opening the sealed door. Long Xiu. "Ago Veltar were different. We were not as telepathic as we are now. My people used science to make our minds stronger, to make us more connected to each other." The door finally opened with a hiss of escaping air. Inside, the building was cool and filled with humming machines. Emergency lights cast long shadows on the walls. Jake found a computer terminal that was still working. The screen showed information in Old Veltar language, but some of it was translated into basic trade language that Jake could read. "This was a genetic research facility," he said, studying the data. "They were studying the original Veltar DNA before the telepathic modifications." Zara joined him at the computer. Her eyes grew wide as she read the information. "This cannot be true." "What does it say?" Jake asked. "It says that my condition is not a defect. It says that people like me carry the original Veltar genes, from before the genetic changes." Her voice was shaking. "According to this, I am not broken. I am what my people used to be." Jake felt excitement building in his chest. "That means your uncle was wrong. You're not weak or defective. You're actually more genetically pure than he is." Zara stared at the screen, trying to understand what this meant. Everything she had been taught about herself was a lie. Her people had called her broken, but she was actually closer to their ancestors than they were. "There is more," she said, pointing to another section of data. "It says that the telepathic modifications have side effects. They make my people more connected to each other, but they also make them less able to think as individuals. The stronger their telepathy becomes, the weaker their individual creativity and problem-solving abilities become." Jake nodded. "That explains a lot. Your people are so focused on group thinking that they can't adapt when they face new situations. But you can think for yourself because you don't have that telepathic connection controlling your thoughts." A loud bang came from outside the building. Through the window, Jake could see Kethvar and his warriors approaching. The heat was clearly affecting them. Their movements were slower and they seemed confused. "Their telepathic link is being disrupted by the energy from the molten core," Zara explained. "They are not used to thinking completely alone." Jake started downloading the research data onto his portable device. "This information could change everything for your people. It proves that diversity makes a species stronger, not weaker." "Kethvar will never accept this truth," Zara said sadly. "He has spent his whole life believing that telepathic strength is the only thing that matters." The building shook as something heavy hit the outside wall. Through the speakers, they heard Kethvar's voice, but it sounded strained and angry. "Come out, contaminated ones, face your judgment with honor." Jake finished downloading the data and grabbed his rifle. "The heat is affecting their equipment too. Their weapons might not work at full power down here. But there are still 5 of them and only 2 of us," Zara pointed out. "True," Jake said with a grin, "but we have something they don't have." "What is that?" "We know how to work together as equals. They're used to following one leader's telepathic commands. Without that connection, they're just 5 confused individuals." Jake activated the building's defense systems. Ancient but still functional energy barriers appeared around the entrances. Warning lights flashed and an automated voice began speaking in Old Veltar language. "What is it saying?" Jake asked. Zara listened carefully. "It is warning about dangerous genetic contamination in the area. It says that anyone who enters without proper clearance will be quarantined." Jake laughed. "Perfect. Your own people's ancient security system is trying to protect us from them." Outside, the warriors were arguing with each other. Without their telepathic link, they could not coordinate their actions effectively. Some wanted to blast through the barriers while others wanted to retreat to a safer distance. Kethvar was shouting orders, but his authority was weaker, without his telepathic power backing up his words. For the first time in his life, he had to convince people with spoken words instead of mental commands. "They are falling apart," Zara observed. Without their shared thoughts, they do not know how to work as a team. And that, Jake said, is exactly what we're going to use against them. The energy barriers around the research facility flickered and sparked. Jake could see that the old defense systems would not hold much longer. Kethvar's warriors had found a way to overload them by combining their weapon fire. "We need a plan," Jake said, checking his rifle's power level. It was almost empty. Zara was studying the facility's computer systems. "I can access the communication array," she said. "I can broadcast the research data to other Veltar colonies." "That's good, but it won't help us right now," Jake replied. "Your uncle isn't going to stop just because we prove he's wrong." The first energy barrier failed with a loud crack. Sparks flew across the entrance as the ancient machinery finally gave up. "Contaminated ones." Kethvar's voice echoed through the building. "You have nowhere left to run. Come out and accept your fate." Jake activated the facility's internal defense systems. Metal doors slammed shut throughout the building, dividing it into separate sections. Emergency lights turned red, and warning alarms began to sound. "This will slow them down," Jake said, "but not for long." They moved deeper into the facility, toward the main laboratory. Jake hoped to find something useful there, maybe more weapons or a way to escape. In the lab, they found something better. Large tanks filled with glowing liquid lined the walls. Computer screens showed genetic data and cellular structures. "These are growth chambers," Zara explained. "The original researchers used them to study genetic changes." Jake had an idea. He started pressing buttons on the control panel. "Can you make them release that liquid? Why would you want to do that?" "Trust me," Jake said with a smile. The sound of metal being torn apart came from behind them. Kethvar's warriors were breaking through the security doors faster than expected. Zara worked quickly on the laboratory controls. The tanks began to drain, and glowing liquid flowed across the floor toward the entrance. "What will this do?" she asked. "It's full of the original Veltar genetic material, right?" "Maybe it will react with their modified genetics." The first warrior entered the laboratory and stepped into the glowing liquid. Nothing happened for a moment, then he stopped moving. His eyes went wide with confusion. "I can hear them," he whispered. "I can hear the voices of the ancestors." More warriors entered the room. As they stepped into the liquid, the same thing happened to each of them. They stood still, listening to something that only they could hear. Kethvar was the last to enter. When the liquid touched his feet, his face changed completely. The anger and hatred disappeared, replaced by wonder and fear. "What have you done to us?" he asked, but his voice was different now, softer and less certain. "We showed you the truth," Zara said, stepping forward bravely. "That liquid contains the genetic memory of our true ancestors. You are hearing their voices, feeling their thoughts." Jake watched in amazement as the 5 warriors struggled with what they were experiencing. Their modified telepathic abilities were being overwhelmed by the genetic memories of their unmodified ancestors. "This is impossible," Kethvar said. "The ancestors were weak. They had no telepathic power." "They were not weak," Zara replied firmly. "They were different. They thought as individuals. They solved problems with creativity instead of group mind control. They helped each other instead of abandoning the ones who were different." One of the younger warriors fell to his knees. Tears ran down his face. "I can feel it," he said. "I can feel what we lost when we changed ourselves. We traded our souls for power." Jake stepped beside Zara. "Your people became so focused on telepathic strength that you forgot what real strength looks like. Real strength is helping others, not casting them aside." Kethvar looked at Jake with new eyes. "You risked your life to save her, even though she was nothing to you." "She wasn't nothing," Jake said. "She was someone who needed help. That's enough." The genetic liquid was affecting all the warriors now. Their telepathic link was changing, becoming something closer to what their ancestors had experienced. Instead of controlling thoughts, it was sharing emotions and memories. "I remember now," another warrior said quietly. I remember the stories. My grandmother told me about the old days when Veltar cared for their weak and celebrated their differences. Kethavar stared at Zara for a long time. The hardness in his eyes was melting away like ice in the sun. I left you to die, he said, his voice full of shame. My own blood, and I left you to die because I thought you were defective. You thought you were protecting the strong, Zara said gently. But you were wrong about what makes us strong. Jake activated the communication array. The research data began broadcasting to Veltar colonies across the galaxy. Soon, everyone would know the truth about their genetic modifications and what they had lost. This will change everything, one of the warriors said. It will take time, Jake replied. Change always does, but now you have a choice. You can keep following the old ways, or you can remember what your ancestors taught about caring for each other. Kethavar walked over to Zara. He knelt down in front of her, something he had never done before. Forgive me, child, he said. I was blind to your true strength. Zara helped her uncle stand up. We all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them. 3 days later, Jake and Zara stood beside Jake's small spacecraft. The other warriors had returned to their people to share what they had learned. Some Veltar would accept the new knowledge, while others would reject it. Change would be slow and difficult. Where will you go now? Zara asked Jake. I don't know, he said honestly. I'm still exiled from the human colonies. Maybe I'll find another planet that needs a geologist. Or maybe, Zara said with a smile, you could take a partner with you. Someone who understands what it's like to be different. Jake looked at her and grinned. I'd like that. The universe is big enough for both of us. As their ship lifted off from Kepler 442c, Jake and Zara looked down at the red planet that had changed both their lives. They had found something more valuable than any mineral deposit. They had found proof that differences made them stronger, not weaker. The stars ahead held countless worlds and endless possibilities for two outcasts who had learned that true strength came from standing together.